Hello there, it's Jamie J. I am the founder of Bottleneck Distant Assistance, host of Live with Bottleneck, where we help stop the bottleneck in your business and your life. And I am super pumped today. This is the first live we're doing after the new year here, and I cannot wait to share this with one of my good friends, David Shriner-Cahn. We're going to have a great conversation. So stay tuned. If you're on Facebook and you want to leave a comment so that I can see it while we're doing the live, if you're watching this live, then I would encourage you to go to StreamYard.com/Facebook, and that will, and just say, yes, it's okay for me to leave comments on the live stream. Then I can see them now. Otherwise, if you're watching this at a later time and it's not live, or you're putting on comments that I can't see, I will go ahead and respond to those at a later time. And definitely anything I can do to forward this off to Mr. David Shriner-Cahn, I will definitely do that. So let's go ahead and get this thing started. We'll kick it off here and be back in about 38 seconds so I can introduce you to the one and only David Shriner-Cahn. All right, we're here. Hello, my name is Jamie J. Welcome to Live with Bottleneck, where we help stop the bottleneck in your business and in your life. I'm super excited today to introduce you to the one and only David Shriner-Cahn. David Shriner-Cahn has been a friend of mine for many years, and one of the few friends of mine that I've met actually in person. And he took us on a little trip around New York and gave us some history on Grand Central Station. We just had a wonderful time hanging out. But David is a community builder. We're going to be talking about how to build a successful consulting business after 20 plus years as an employee. And if you want to learn more about David, you can go to smashingtheplateau.com. After 28 years as a highly skilled employee, David Shriner-Cahn was told that his job was over. In spite of the immediate trauma and fear, he knew that as his next step, he'd rather work for himself and have more control over his destiny. That was in 2006. As a matter of fact, the same year, I decided to leave corporate America and become an entrepreneur. Today, David is a thriving entrepreneur, podcaster, and speaker. He is guiding highly skilled professionals who are recovering from a late career job loss and who yearn to impact the world with their knowledge and creativity by becoming successful entrepreneurs. So without any further ado, please allow me to introduce you to David Shriner-Cahn. How are you, sir? Hey,
Jamie. Thanks for inviting me on.
Oh my gosh, this is exciting. As I said, you and I have been friends for quite a while. You've been just a beacon of light for me. I've learned so much from you, and it's so cool to see what you're doing now. I know how hard you've worked on this project, and it's just really neat to see it kind of coming to fruition here. And I wonder, before we kind of jump into that, if you could tell us, for those people that may not know you or being introduced to you for the first time, maybe you can give us a little bit more details on your background and who you are and what you've been up to.
Sure. And Jamie, I forgot two things that you mentioned in the intro. One is I forgot about the walk through Grand Central Station, which is a really cool place. So if you're going to New York City, you got to check out Grand Central Station. It's a real gem. Second is I guess I knew, but I kind of forgotten that we both started our businesses the same year. So we definitely have that in common. We've shared a lot of the trials and tribulations along the way.
Yeah, and I will say one thing that's really stuck with me is that you shared they were getting ready to tear down Grand Central Station, and Jackie Onassis played a big role in saving Grand Central Station, right?
Yeah, shows you the power of an influencer.
Well, I wonder if maybe you could tell us a little bit more about you, what you've been up to, and kind
Sure.
of take us into our conversation for today.
Yeah. So first of all, I studied chemical engineering. I have a master's from Cornell in chemical engineering. I worked at two different jobs for um, about a total of a little over 4 years. And my first sort of, I'm going to say, career pivot is probably the wrong way to describe it. I would say it was like a rude awakening about um, the world of work and what happens in careers when a month after I had received a great performance review and a big raise, my boss called me into his office and he says, David, I have good news and bad news. The good news is you're doing a great job. The bad news is you don't have a job here anymore. And I was totally blindsided by it because I was young and naive. I had studied engineering, so my skill was doing engineering work. I was not trained in business. I didn't think about the business. I didn't pay attention to the fact that the company that I worked for had lost a lot of business. Um, but I certainly learned about that when they fired a huge portion of the staff. So that was sort of my first rude awakening. And I did a lot of soul searching and decided that I didn't really think the corporate life was where I wanted to spend like the next number of decades. And I ended up going into the nonprofit sector, um, which is that's like a whole episode in and of itself. But suffice it to say, it was a good career. I was in that sector for 23 years. I enjoyed the work. Um, the thing that was always gnawing at me is if it could happen to me and I was blindsided earlier on in my career, it could happen again. And I saw, you know, I it's like when something happens, you start to pay attention to other instances where it happens. So I saw things like there was a sister organization where an employee, a dedicated employee, one of these people who was always like the first one in and the last one out, and this was a nonprofit organization that was focused on helping the community. So she had 27 years of service, and not only did they end her job, which I could never understand why, but security escorted her out. I thought, like, this is not the way to treat people. So I saw even out. I consider myself outside the sort of the corporate environment because I was in the nonprofit sector, but I still saw um, lots of behavior that was detrimental to the well-being of employees. I know you're a big proponent of having the right culture, and I know that you focus really heavily on treating employees properly. Um, and I have to say, I was lucky. The places where I worked, employees were well treated, but I saw lots of instances where that wasn't true. And I also knew that the older you got, the harder it would be to get a new job if you had to. And so I began to think long and hard about going into my own business, even though I'll be honest, I really knew very little about entrepreneurship. I had a few friends who are entrepreneurs. I had one in particular who learned early on in his career that he didn't play well with others as he describes it, and so he started his own solopreneur business. And he made a living, and he was happy with what he was doing. So I saw that there were people that did it, and I also got to know, one of the benefits of being in a nonprofit organization is the people that serve on the boards are usually quite successful in business. So I got to know some very successful executives, um, and I got to see sort of how their careers kind of how their careers played out. And I made the decision that at some point I really wanted to be my own boss, and the easiest way to do it would be to take what I knew and take the sector that I was in and just do the same work as a consultant. And the reality is, after I was in my last job for close to 18 years, there was a little, and I know this is going to probably um, sound familiar to many people. There was some stuff going on that didn't involve me personally in the organization that I thought eventually was going to impact my job. And in fact, it did. So my job was terminated. And I will say the organization tried to handle it as gently as possible and as humanely as possible. So I was not shown out by security. I actually had a lot of leeway to make the transition, and they tried to be as supportive as possible. But that does not happen to everybody. So I did decide I was going to be a nonprofit consultant. That was like nonprofit management. That was my thing. And once I was in my own business, I realized there was a lot that I didn't know. Jamie, you are on mute.
Yes, I'm on mute. You
I
and me
see the
both.
mouth moving, but I hear nothing.
That's probably a blessing in disguise.
I don't think so.
So one of the things I can totally empathize with you, and making that transition, thinking, man, why don't they do this? Why don't they do this? Why don't they do this? I'm going to go out on my own and do it. And all of a sudden, you're like, wow, there's so much that goes on in this world. It's so easy to call yourself an entrepreneur. It's a lot different to be a successful business owner, whatever success means to you. In my humble opinion, it was really nice that you demonstrated kind of what happened to you in your personal life. I think a lot of other people can identify that, whether or not they were guided out by security. In my instance, I went into the big glass office right in the middle of the big office space, and was let go, and I had to do that walk of shame, and it was embarrassing. I felt terrible. I felt no good. I didn't, all these negative emotions came over me, and that was the one time I was actually fired from a position, and it just did not feel good. And I vowed to myself, I said, and by the way, the industry that I got fired from is now the industry that I am a business leader in. So it's kind of ironic how that happened. But I took from that, and I just had to kind of fight my way through learning. And in the beginning, I don't necessarily know if I can say I pretended, but I kind of, if someone said, hey, can you do this? I would say yes and go figure it out. Right. So I kind of learned real time on how to get better. Did you experience any of that? Like when you first got
I definitely did. I actually want to echo something you just said about the embarrassment and the shame. There is, excuse me, there is a lot of embarrassment and shame around job loss. I didn't tell people that I was fired. I thought it would impact my ability to build my business and just impact negatively on my character. So I did not tell people. And in fact, when I started my second podcast, Going Solo, where you shared that story about the walk of shame.
Yeah.
I discovered that many of the successful consultants that I had known for years started their business when they got fired, but they never talked about it. So
Yeah.
it's pretty common. And in fact, the statistics in the United States are, if you're over the age of 50, you have more than a 50% likelihood that your job will be terminated. And it won't be your decision.
Yeah, it's a shame. And I did want to quickly point out Deb Coviello, the drop-in CEO, says, great to see some of my favorite people, Jamie J and David Shriner-Cahn. She's wonderful. And Grant Diggles, love this content. Love you, Grant. But I think you absolutely nailed this. I think as you get older, as you mature, your salary is increasing, and companies are looking hopefully, right? But people, I would say, earning the most, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm completely wrong here, but the people earning the most are those that have a little bit more experience. They have some time in, and companies are looking to find ways of getting stuff done at the most cost-effective way of doing that. And a lot of time that comes at the price of the senior level management.
Yeah, sometimes there's a new boss that comes in, like you get a new manager, and the new manager is hired from another company, and he or she feels like they have to prove themselves. And how do they do that? They try to cut costs, and they have no history of relationship with their direct reports. So they look at the numbers, and the more expensive people are often the ones that end up being shown the exit door.
Either with security detail or
Or with,
not.
yeah, hopefully without, but yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Smashing the Plateau. I love Smashing the Plateau. I've been fortunate enough to be a guest on your podcast, I believe 2, maybe 3 times or something like that. And every time it's just been a wonderful conversation. I really love the flow that you have. The guests you have are amazing. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about Smashing Plateau and going solo and how that kind of came to fruition with your community.
Sure. So, one of the things that I realized fairly early on in my career as an entrepreneur is how important your relationships are, your network is, and those people that are in communities that you're part of. So, keep that thought in mind, and I'll come back to it as I describe the shows and kind of how they have evolved and why in fact I host them. Um, first of all, I realized that as a consultant, if I wanted to become better known, that I probably needed some way to share my ideas. And initially, that was a blog. So we started a blog, and we actually stumbled into this kind of by accident, which is I had hired a team member to help with it. And because I'd hired a team member, I was forced to give him work on a schedule, which meant I had to create a content calendar, which is kind of the bedrock of any content creation strategy. So we were producing blog posts consistently multiple times per week from the beginning. And then our audience told us they wanted greater depth in the content. And a lot of the content was actually text-based interviews. So we decided to try audio interviews, which was the first podcast, Smashing the Plateau. And the theme of the show initially was about implementation. I always have seen that, people are enamored of breakthroughs, and breakthroughs are what other people see after somebody has taken hundreds or thousands of steps and pivots. So being able to take all those steps and pivots is actually pretty challenging. And so the folk and there was a lot of content, especially podcasts on startups and the hustle. And life is not generally about startups and the hustle. I don't know about you, but I've spent very little of my time actually starting something. I spend most of my time running something. And so, and particularly, the more successful you are, the more time you spend running something. Yet stuff happens every day that's challenging. So how do you get over those challenges and keep working on what it is that is going to drive your success? That was the initial idea behind Smashing the Plateau.
So maybe instead of calling them startups, we can call them run-ups.
Yeah, maybe. might be a better description.
Well, so in going back to this, now that we kind of have an understanding for Smashing the Plateau, how did you get involved with going solo? And then with going solo, we can circle back around and see, okay, what did that do to get you where you are now?
Yeah. So here's the thing about content creation, which I know that but I think if you're not as involved in content creation as Jamie and I are, this is something that I think would be helpful to you, which is, yes, content creation gets your ideas out, but if you're creating content in any format that involves connecting with other people, like an interview-based show like this one, you're also building relationships with the people that you invite onto your platform. You're learning from the people that you invite onto your platform. And when I looked back on the first 4 or 5 years of Smashing the Plateau, where we had released episodes every single week, and for most of the 4 to 5 years, it was 2 episodes a week. So that's a lot of shows. That was like, I don't know, at that point, it was probably 500 or so episodes. That's a lot of conversations. You don't need to have that many conversations to get a sense of what's going on in the market. But when I looked at the track record, I saw that the majority of guests were solopreneurs like me, consultants, coaches, people in small professional service businesses. The audience was mostly the same. And I also realized that most of them were in the second half of their career. And like me, many of them had also been an employee for the first chunk of their career. And so I decided to start a second show going solo to focus on how do you manage that transition from employee to consultant? Because those initial days, weeks, months, and even couple of years are really challenging. That's kind of the make it or break it. If you can get past the first 2 years running a consulting business, then I think you have a much greater likelihood of A, staying in it for the long term, but B, being successful and having the consulting business do what it is you want it to do for you in your life. So that was how the second show started. And I also realized, I mentioned earlier on that for me, being part of communities was always a game changer. I joined a business networking group after I was in business for about a year. That drastically changed the nature of my business for the better. It connected me with people that are still friends and some of whom are still clients, even though I'm not part of that networking organization anymore. Podcasting has done some of the same thing. You create you end up being part of a community of podcasters. And so I realized how important that was. And also what I had heard from so many folks on going solo is, especially if you're in a significant role in an organization, you have this built-in social network. Right? There's a formal network, formal social structure, and an informal social structure. Once you walk out the door, it's gone. Not only the formal one for sure is gone. The interesting thing is the informal one. It's like all your quote unquote friends from work are suddenly ghosting you. And you need a new community. So the other reason why you need it is you're trying all these things for the first time. When you're doing things outside your comfort zone, yes, you may be growing because you're doing new things, but it's pretty scary. And if you're in a supportive community, your friends in the community not only will help you, but they will also do things like, if you're pricing too low, which a lot of consultants do when they first come out, they'll call you on it and they'll say, I had a proposal like that. And here's how I approach pricing. And I think you could actually charge a whole lot more. What you're offering is a lot more value than you're proposing. So what I've seen is consultants that are in these communities make more money. They do better. They have a place where they can test out ideas and get some feedback. And they develop friends that are supportive. So, as in my intro, you mentioned that I am a community builder. And I realized over my career, that is actually one of the skills that I have always used in whether I was an employee or an entrepreneur, being part of communities, taking a leadership role. And so I decided last year that, well, it's probably time for me to launch our own community that will support all these folks, which is why we started the Smashing the Plateau community, which I'm proud to say not only has launched, but we're getting some really nice engagement. And I see folks connecting, offering to help one another, looking for ways to grow together. So I'm really touched by the fact that people that I've known for a long time have wanted to be part of this.
Yeah, it really is fantastic. And I just want to echo something that Deb said here, Deb Coviello. She is taking off. She said, thanks for the great conversation. But she said she agrees. Podcasting has been the best networking platform to build a higher percentage, high quality relationships, surpasses other professional networking groups or communities. And I've dropped networking groups and surged forward with podcast relationships. And it's just right there. I agree with that as well. I think it's perfect. I was talking with Grant Diggles earlier, who had left a comment earlier, and told him that had it not been for podcasting, you and I would have never met. Bottleneck would not be a company had it not been for podcasting, which in essence is a form of community development, where you can really build a community. And you're right. I think community development is something that you greatly excel at. And it's almost like now it's easy to say it comes natural to you, but I mean, you worked at it for a little bit, but now you've kind of you've kind of put community development kind of into stone a little bit. So you have the processes in place, and it's not easy to build a community. What would you say are some of the things that building a community consists of in order to build a strong, long-term, long-lasting community?
The most important thing is active listening. You've got to listen to the members of the community, hear what they're saying and hear what they're not saying. People want to be heard. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. So your job as the community leader is to listen to what they want, listen to what they're not saying. That's the most important thing. And then I would say the next most important thing is constantly not just respond to people in the community, but reach out to members of the community. So if you have somebody in the community that says, I want to do some market research on this topic, and you see they're not taking action, reach out to them and say, how can I help you take the first step? I know you want to do this. I know that you know what kinds of questions to ask. Who do you need to meet that might be an easy person for you to have a conversation with that will help you with the market research? Make the introduction, right? Those are some of the things you can do that will take some time, but that is what I think is really essential to building community.
Ooh, that's perfect. Active listening. Yeah. So,
Can I say one other thing?
Yeah, because I have a thought on that too.
Yeah. The other thing is I'm a big believer that if your community is all about you and your ego, then I kind of question your why.
I question it too. Active listening is huge. One thing I find myself doing, and this is probably a good time for me to ask this question one time, is a lot of times you'll be saying something, especially in an interview style format like this. It's more of a dialogue. Yes, of course I know you, so I have the added benefit of knowing a little bit more than most of my guests. So this conversation's a little more natural for me. But even then, I love having great dialogue where I do a little bit of research, but I like getting surprised so that it makes me think a little bit different. Because I used to really research the heck out of my guests and really like dive into where did they go to high school? I went crazy deep on that stuff. And then I found out we didn't even touch base on half of those things. It was nice to know some of it, but I got my questions it got real boring after a while. But then I started getting into this kind of engage. I don't know if I think it would be active listening, but then I would start thinking of things like, oh my gosh, something you just said, I have a question about that. So while you were talking about active listening, all of a sudden you were still talking. I'm like, oh, okay, I have a good question. I'm like, well, that's not being very fair. Listen to the complete thought from David. So I went back to active listening again. But that's exactly what I was thinking when you were talking about that. And I felt, man, I feel a little selfish there for thinking like that. But at the same time, I want to make sure we have a good conversation. And because you said that, it brought my mind right back to listening again. In the past, I've talk, and there's no way I'm going to learn if I'm talking.
That's true. One of the things you can do as a podcaster, and honestly, you can do this on video as well. But on audio, it's very easy, which is you can take notes. And so the act of writing down, especially if you're writing things down manually with a pen on paper, the old fashioned way, it actually helps your listening. So that's one technique. And you can do it when you're on video. You'll see, people on video making notes. There's nothing wrong with that. That helps. The other thing is just be curious. I mean, you're a really curious person, Jamie. You like to learn about people. And so, I think about two really great interviewers that had they have very different processes for preparing for an interview. Larry King and Terry Gross, both with decades of experience interviewing people and thousands of shows of episodes of shows that they've done. Terry does a huge amount of research on every guest. If her guest has written a book, she reads the book. If they've produced a movie, she watches the movie. Larry King, if his guest had written a book, he purposely wouldn't read it. He goes in wanting to know, to have the same experience that the viewer or the listener has, which is knowing nothing about the guest, and just uses his curiosity. So, they're very different techniques in terms of preparation, but in essence, the curiosity component, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I would agree. And that curiosity, not only for podcasting, but for community development, I think is really important as well. I think I'm going to make a statement and then a question will follow. But in my experience, building community has basically been trying to empower those members to speak up, to give them an opportunity, to give them a voice, and to overcome the fear of their thoughts and how those may not work, or it may be, in their opinion, ignorant or dumb, or, oh my gosh, if I know this, everybody does. So I don't even want to speak up. And I feel that part of being a good community leader, good community developer, is making sure that you provide an area, or an atmosphere that invokes ideas, concepts, thoughts, so that people aren't, rolling their eyes like, oh my gosh, listen to what this person said. You don't want that. And so my question to you is, how do you develop a community that promotes this positive kind of culture where people, even though they may not know something, or maybe they do and they're afraid to kind of share it, how do you promote and instill this positive culture within the guidelines of a community?
Yeah, there's one technique actually that you can use that can help. And the thing to keep in mind is that you want to create a culture that is non-judgmental, because if it is judgmental, people will be afraid to raise ideas, particularly if they or to voice their ideas, particularly if they think their ideas might be controversial. And one way you can foster this non-judgmental atmosphere is by teaching people to respond by sharing experiences that they've had, as opposed to sharing comments that are judgmental. Because we've all had experiences, and the experiences shape who we are. And there are many times when we can think of experiences we've had that may be similar to an idea that somebody is raising. It's just sharing the experience. An experience is not judgmental. It happened. And you have your own personal, like, emotional reaction to the experience. But you can say, this happened to me and this is how I feel about it. But that doesn't negate the idea that somebody else has presented.
Yeah, you're right. And there's always going to be times, like you said, being uncomfortable and maybe getting upset, or not being, in the right mind. But as long as and I think, what, actually, when we have our meetings, every single person in our company meetings always talks about what missteps they made. I don't say failures. I don't say mistake. I say missteps for a reason, because just like I am getting more comfortable with being uncomfortable, as you know, writing my book, it was very uncomfortable. I was deathly afraid of putting that out in the world, but I did it. So I'm getting a little more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that's the same way community development needs to happen is people need to be okay with being uncomfortable and being okay with maybe not having a positive feeling all of the time, but how do you deal with those? And that's part of community development, in my opinion, is you get other people that can support you through those tough times. And one of the biggest things in our missteps, and I've said this before, is I didn't even know this was going to happen, but the first time I implemented this in our program, someone talked about a misstep that had occurred without any direction or guidance from me. Someone else on the team spoke up and said, you know what, I can help you with that. And that blew my mind, that little tiny tweak in the agenda. And now all of a sudden people are okay. They're getting a little more comfortable with being uncomfortable and saying, hey, you know what, I made this misstep. This is what I need to do, or can I get some help on this? And all of a sudden other people step up and other people pull everybody up. So I think I think that's a really, really important thing to take into consideration. We're all going to make mistakes. We're going to continue to make mistakes. We're humans, but embrace the
Absolutely.
mistakes. Yeah. Yeah. So we're getting towards the end of the time here. I want to respect your time. But I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about how people can get in touch with you through the different links here, and I'll share them as you talk about them. But also, what are you working on right now, and who is that perfect person that you can help out?
Yeah, so people can get in touch with me through our website, smash. Sorry, my voice is going. Smashingtheplateau.com. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is probably the best social media platform. I am also on Facebook and Twitter, but I tend to spend more time on LinkedIn. And you can go to our website and send me a note and we can set up a time to speak. But the person that what I'm working on right now actually is building the membership community, the Smashing the Plateau community, and the person that we can help most is someone who has 20 plus years of experience as an employee. I would say like mid to high level, and they either are planning to go out on their own or they have gone out on their own, or they could be a little further on in their consulting business, and they feel like it's not doing what they wanted to do, and they want to be part of a community with other consultants. We can help those people build their business, help the business be more focused on what they want. Yes, we can help them make more money, but that's not always the main thing. It depends on what the issues are and who they are. But essentially, those people 20 plus years as an employee, and now they're a consultant or about to be.
Fantastic. Yeah, and they can just go to smashingtheplateau.com/community to learn more. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the page that describes the community.
Okay. Yeah, and thank you for sharing that, because I think it's really good for people to know where they are in life, that, hey, this is a really good time. I can go reach out to David and see if he can get me help and sorted, because emotions. Tell us about the emotional state you've seen in these community members that are making this transition. I mean, 20 years, that's a long time to develop habits, right? And all of a sudden,
Yes.
something new is happening.
So here's one that I've had people talk to me about. You go from a role where your inbox is always overflowing and there are always people waiting at your door to talk to you, and your calendar is full, to an empty inbox, nothing on your calendar, and nobody pounding down your door to try to talk to you. Imagine how that makes you feel.
Yeah, I don't know. I if I have 10 unopened emails, I start freaking out. But then it's almost like I gravitate towards that. Like, okay, what's next? What's next? And then all of a sudden, nothing, crickets. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's happening? People hate me.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So imagine you're at that stage where you have never sold anything as a consultant, and nobody seems to be running after you to try to sell something. Like, where do you start? And then of course you're spending a lot of time alone, so all these the fears get blown out of proportion in your head. You wonder about your value, and I've talked to people that were earning lots of money in corporate and went out on their own and just freaked out.
I can imagine. I can totally imagine. Grant says going solo is a total grind if you don't have a network of people and resources to help you along. True entrepreneurs struggle with asking for help. At least that's the truth for Grant. The classic superhero syndrome.
Yeah, there's this myth in America that entrepreneurs are successful on their own, like the lone man superhero. And I have to say that I think the myth is primarily a male myth more than a female myth. But it's not true. I've yet to meet anybody who's successful in business and does it on his own or her own. They always have a team, and solopreneurs have teams. I'm a solopreneur and I have a team.
Yes, exactly. I think it's often overstated and overlooked. David, is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap?
If anybody who's watching this has questions about how to navigate the murky waters of this transition from employee to consultant, set up a time to speak with me. I'd be happy to chat. It's not easy. The good news is you can do it. You can make a living as a consultant or a solopreneur. It's not like going from paycheck to paycheck. Your income won't go from 0 to 100% overnight, but you can make it work. And I'd be happy to talk to you if you have questions about how to do it.
Yeah, I can't recommend it enough. You gotta do something you're passionate about. David, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jamie.
Time. Yeah, this is awesome. Can you hold on one quick second while I wrap up?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. David Shriner-Cahn. Never a disappointment. Awesome. David is fantastic. I cannot recommend reaching out to him enough. No matter where you're at or what you're doing, if you're going to be branching out, going into the interwebs, doing some kind of marketing to extend your messaging or anything like that, if you're going solo or have recently gone solo, I cannot recommend reaching out to David enough. I've known David, I think 7 or 8 years, something like that, many years. Every single time I talk to him, I learn something new. He's vested in continuing his own education, and now he's able to share that with so many other people. So I would highly encourage you to go to smashingtheplateau.com, listen to his podcast. If you're interested in the community aspect of it, you can go to smashingtheplateau.com/community. Pretty simple and straightforward. David is on Facebook and Twitter, but he likes to hang out on LinkedIn. So check him out on LinkedIn and reach out to him and just say, hey, I heard you on Live with Bottleneck. I'd love to chat with you. I guarantee you'll be welcomed. There'll be a warm reception. And when it comes to active listening, believe me, David is the epitome of an active listener. So speak out all of your challenges and David will help you out. So I can't recommend it enough. Go check out smashingtheplateau.com/community for David Shriner-Cahn. If you want to hear other episodes and learn how to break through the bottleneck in your business today and your life, you can go to bottleneck.online/BTV. That stands for Bottleneck Television. And you can see hundreds of other videos that are very similar to maybe not very similar to what we're doing today, but a lot of things that you can learn about ways to improve your business. And we also have some fun stuff on there, like how we got custom Nike shoes done for Bottleneck and just ridiculous things like that. We like to keep it light. If you haven't already, go to quitrepeatingyourself.com. Learn about my new book, How Today's Leaders Are Using Systems and Processes to Grow Their Business the Right Way. That's called Quit Repeating Yourself. Again, we were talking to David Shriner-Cahn today, community builder at smashingtheplateau.com. And we talked about how to build a successful consulting business after 20 plus years as an employee. Previously, we talked with Mark Cook, owner of Winfield Partners. We talked about the breakthroughs, unstick priorities with rapid innovation. He has an incredible new podcast out. Go check it out. You'll absolutely love it. And if you didn't get a chance to listen to that episode, please go listen to it because it was fantastic. That's about it here, live with Bottleneck. My name is Jamie J. I'm the founder of Bottleneck Distant Assistance, host of Live with Bottleneck. Hope you had a wonderful day. And don't forget, create your own ripple. We will talk to you again soon.